Have you ever wondered if it's possible to live in sync with your cycle? Do you struggle with a negative mindset around your period? Are you wondering if it's possible to be feminist and anti-birth control? We're going to explore these questions and so much more in the Managing Your Fertility podcast, because this is about helping you live a whole and full life. I'm your host and guide, Bridget Busacker, joining you in this journey of exploration related to women's healthcare, feminism, and fertility awareness. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Okay.
That wasn't too bad.
Monica and Renzo, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to kick off season 3. We're doing a double date episode. We have you guys joining us. We have my husband David joining us. So this is going to be really great and wonderful. So to kick off, for those who don't know Renzo and Monica Ortega, they are high school sweethearts, married almost 10 years and parents to 5 kiddos. They co-founded an engagement and marriage online ministry called To Become Family. Monica and Renzo's hope is to restore confidence in family life with the help, writings, and intercession of St. John Paul the Great. Renzo is a director of social work for a local nursing home, and Monica is a stay-at-home mom and homeschools the older 3 kids. Their favorite date night is takeout in bed watching crime shows or The Office. Yes. You guys, good choices. We have similarities among us. We're not quite high school sweethearts. We're like wannabe high school sweethearts. We started dating like the beginning of college, and we also love The Office because you can't go wrong. So good. So tell us a bit about your story. Tell us a little bit more about how you started your ministry and your business To Become Family, and your podcast now too, Pre-Cana with the Pope.
Yeah.
So much. Do I? We can try. So it's we started blogging. So To Become Family started very, very early before it was even To Become Family. We started with I started a blog called Catholic Sad, which stood for Catholic Stay-at-Home Dad. Because at one point we switched roles. I stayed home with the kids. Monica went back to work as a teacher. And in order to just to capture what it was like to be a stay-at-home dad, I decided to blog and start writing.
As millennials do.
Yes, right. So don't people want to know my thoughts? And so I just started writing about it. And then I don't know if I got bored, but we switched from that to all right, I'm going to make a men's ministry and focus on virtue building. So the blog kind of evolved into that. But I just didn't feel like God was calling me to that anymore. So just from talking and praying together, we decided to take what I was trying to do, but not just focus on stay-at-home parents and not just focus on husbands and fathers, but let's focus on the family. It started as a completely different thing, but God kind of slowly unveiled what he wanted us to do, because I still feel very convicted about the ministry now, because I feel like this is what he wants us to do. The amount of people that are reaching out to us and letting us know how an article or episode or something has impacted them is amazing, compared to, nobody cared about my Catholic stay-at-home dad articles, except my mom was a great fan. She was on every single, but this is definitely where God has brought us to after a very long journey.
Yeah. And I think kind of teaming up has been helpful, because Renzo's definitely the creative in the relationship and I'm more of the task manager. So combining our 2 skills allows this to continue to flow. So if creative juices aren't flowing, something still gets posted or something still gets done, or okay, well, we need a timeline for this, or that project is unrealistic, babe.
We're doing it.
But and then I think too, you'd been doing a lot of reading while you were home with the kids, from JP too, and that really kickstarted a lot of healing in our marriage, and things were going okay. We were doing the marriage thing and we were doing the things that we were supposed to do, but there was still really key pieces missing, and we felt like they were really intangible.
She's being very kind. Things are less than okay, and there's a lot of things missing.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's when it became To Become Family. We hope to reveal things about our relationship and struggles we've had that we don't feel like people were honest with us prior to getting married. There's a lot of things that we that we ended up encountering that we had no idea we were going to encounter.
Why did no one tell us these things?
And it's not like we weren't involved in our faith. And I think that was our biggest gripe, is that like we were very committed to our faith. Like we were around a lot of people that could have said like, hey, these are the things that are going to come up. But instead we kind of were left to kind of make it up as we went. And we're like, okay, let's not let other people have to go through this. Let's just share our situations and our experiences, and hopefully others could learn from them so that they can not go through the same types of things we went through.
Yeah. So we kind of wanted to join. So To Become Family got its name from Familiaris Consortio, when John Paul the Great says families become what you are. And so just trying to like bring back that like we have what it takes. We just have to like really pull from the graces of the sacrament, and there's practical pieces to it as well. And like putting those things together in one place to hopefully, just restore confidence in family life, that we can do it.
Yes.
That's really awesome. I think it really resonated. I saw us both nodding with the idea that, why didn't someone tell us this? We had similar experiences with that as well. And I think being involved in our faith, you were a convert a year before we got married, a little over a year before we got married. And we had both been heavily involved in ministry in college. And we did like all kinds of things during engagement, trying to be involved in our faith. And yet it still feels like we're entering in almost to year 6 of our marriage, like it's celebrating 6. Yeah. And it just, there are things that come up where you're like, I don't even know if this is like a thing or not. Is this normal or not? And what resources are available, or who are you supposed to go to be able to figure out how does this work and what are we supposed to do? Because a lot of times a priest is like, well, I don't know exactly how to support you. And you're like, okay, so then what?
Yeah. Well, it's also intimidating to bring up that you're struggling with your spouse to people that you think never struggle. I know that that's something that is it just us? Like, that we're going through these things. So, and as we've been able to share through the website and then also through the podcast episodes, people have been able to share like, oh no, we're going through this too. Or like, we're right in this current situation. Thank you so much for sharing. We're not the only ones. And more than anything, like we don't want to give advice, but more of have people have those conversations with each other, but not feel alone while they're going through it.
Yeah. I think our biggest goal is we've called it like conversation starters. Just like, here are things that you are not alone in. Now go talk to each other about them. Because like, even if it's something that we experienced and this is kind of how we've worked through it, and like, it's improving or what have you, like that's unique to our relationship. But it's just to kind of like bring it up, and that like our church is a safe place to find answers, and like, to not be afraid to look. I have a sneeze stuck in my nose. I'm sorry.
Okay. I think that's great though, because that I think, having conversations that are really specific to each couple is so important, and acknowledging that, because I think it's really tempting to say, give me the 5 things that I should do and I'm just going to do those, or tell me what I should do, forgetting that we also need to do the work. Like we need to put in the time and the effort and the conversation and the connection to make sure that we're actually focusing on what we're supposed to do and not comparing to everybody else as that benchmark.
Yeah. Cause I mean, like you two and all the YouTubes that are watching, but like you are 2 completely amazingly unique individuals creating a beautiful looks has to be different. Like that's the way God intended it, because he did not want our families to be repeatable. He wanted them to be the way that they're made. And you two as like the leads of the family and the heads of the family, like it's intimidating, but it's also like a really unique and cool opportunity to like, what greatness does like God have planned for the 2 of us to be put together like this? So
yeah, I think that really segues really well, because there's a lot of topics I want to get into with you guys. But you wrote and spoke, and you continue to, about restoring confidence in family life, and I really want to know where this came from, this desire to speak to it. I think there's a lot culturally, socially, that we are seeing going on when it comes to family life. What inspired you guys to really focus in on that more?
Oof. Me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
I see the wheels turning.
No, well, just there's like, where do you start? These are great questions, by the way. Thank you. But so we both came from divorce families. So that was backtracking. So the day that I proposed to Monica was the same day that my parents got divorced or separated officially. And that was a very odd situation, the way it worked out. Monica and I took a group of teenagers to Steubenville for a conference. And I proposed to her on campus, because that's where we've had our first conference. And then on the way back, I found out my parents got separated. And that was very, like, just, I don't want to say earth shattering, but like it really hit me with how this could happen. Like, this is a reality, like that marriage isn't as it should be permanent, not necessarily. Like, we have, and then Monica also coming from a divorced family, from divorced parents. The reality of that being a possibility was there from the beginning. And then just how difficult marriage was and how much effort it took. And there was times when I remember us asking, like, by ourselves, but asking, like, did we make a mistake? Like, is this the right thing? And then finding the answers in the grace that the sacrament gave us, and in the church through a lot of digging, we felt empowered by what the church taught. So whereas going into the relationships, we maybe felt uneasy because, like, this happened to our parents, is this going to happen to us too? The deeper we relied on the sacrament, the deeper we relied on the church, and like through JP2's writings, and we were able to find the confidence that we did have what it took, that God did choose us to be together, and that we can do this. And through that journey that I think went into like our 5th year of marriage, we decided, like, okay, this is what we have to do. We wanted to give this to other couples too, that we're not giving them a encyclical to read so that they can be enlightened, but like, we want them to be empowered by it. Like, this is speaking to who you are and your dignity, so that you could go out and do. And that's the whole, like, from when we got engaged all the way till now, like, that's what's been guiding us.
Yeah. And I think, like Renzo said, my parents divorced. Experience with divorce was like more lifelong for me. So we just came from such like similar but also different backgrounds of what, basically, like, we went into marriage having a mission statement of what we didn't, like, not want to do, as opposed to like what we do want to do. And that's not coming from a place of confidence. That's coming from a place of like passivity, or like crossing my fingers. It's like a place of avoidance versus action. And I think you had mentioned even like the culture, like, I think that that's now seeping into marriages, like in the culture of like young adults and engaged couples and married couples. Like, these are things that I don't want my family to be like this. I don't want to parent like this. I don't want to be this kind of wife, but like, what do I want to do? What do I want my family to look like? What do I want my marriage to look like? And I think reframing it is very, like Renzo said, empowering. So, and that's what the church wants for us. Like, she has confidence in marriage. Like, it's been from the beginning that marriage is very good. And so it's just like finding that again. And it's like reminding us that like, this is not something that just happens when you become an adult, like that. Like, this is not just the next step that you take with somebody. Like, it's your vocation. Like, this is your life that God has planned for you. And like, that's really cool. Like, that's very like awesome. Like, to really think about that like, this isn't just like, oh, what God wants next for you, but like, this is what God wants for you.
And it's also scary. I also think it's important for us in our generation to not frame marriage as this great thing that will fix everything.
Yeah.
Because I think that happens too. It's like, oh, marriage is so great. Go have a bunch of kids. Like, every single and every single step difficult. So I think finding the balance of speaking to the goodness of something, but also speaking to the difficulty of it, is important too. And I don't know if we've struck that perfectly. We're trying to balance, like, because we don't want to get on and complain about our children, but we also, like, we love our children, but it's also very difficult to get them to bed. So just like, it's all of those things are all part of what it is to be married.
I saw that blog post that you guys wrote recently.
Thank you.
I think there's something in the name that like really struck me the first time I heard it, which is to become family. So, you've talked a lot about marriage so far, but there's also something kind of, really, really powerful about family. And, you've talked so far about, what can make marriage difficult or easy to live out. But what about family? What do you think, like, what's the role of family larger in your mission?
I think that's a great question. I think that that like there's your marriage then like starts this new legacy, right? And this new, like the foundation of your marriage creates, it is fruitful and it creates life. And that's like whether the couple has children or not, like they have now created something outside of themselves by two individuals getting married. They themselves have created a family, and that is fruitful. Like that brings something to the world that wasn't there before. And then, like obviously many couples have children, and then how their parenthood has a ripple effect on the world is just mind blowing. It's also intimidating, like you said. And I think that there's like a lot of perspectives in family, and it can get a little like enmeshed, or it can get a little like there's like this desire for like independence versus this desire to like hold on to your past and not like never move on from that. And there's a goodness like somewhere in the middle, that like you've created a new family that is connected to the outside world, to your extended family, to your parents and your siblings and your future grandchildren and what have you. But there's also this like this core of the two of you being married, and like that itself is family. So I think we kind of wanted to like capture the grandness of it, but also like the simplicity of it at the same time.
Yeah, I hope I don't butcher this, but I do. So in the theology of the body, I know that the Hebrew word that's used for Adam before Eve is created is in Hebrew, and then when Eve is created, then he's given the name Adam and Eve, and like they're, and I forgot the way it was reflected on, but like that Adam is known by who Eve is, and Eve is known by who Adam is, because there's like he's given a different name because of that. And I see a lot of that with our relationship and just marriage in general. So like even before we had kids, we took on a new identity by getting married. So like my identity became different. As much as I still felt like myself, like I was now also Monica's husband, and that identity really, to me, governs how I go day to day. And similarly with Monica, like I know like we're a couple, like we are family, we're together. And that governs how we live. And then to add children into that, like I know that my favorite things are that I'm a husband and father. And like that, like when I wake up in the morning, like everything I do is led by that, so that I could do that well. And the hope is that us two becoming family will lead our children to live their lives in a similar way, where they, they're not drawn to all the other things of the world, but like by their vocations, and they're driven by those vocations, so that they can love people through those vocations. And I really like the culture we've created within our family of like, this is how we live. And that's only happened because we were able to become one, and now are creating this new thing.
I think that's beautiful. And the way you guys have phrased it really, I think, just speaks to the beauty of getting married, the goodness in it. Yeah. And then there's, there are the hard aspects too. It's that both and. I think that we see so much in Catholicism and theology of the body. But I think, oftentimes you hear like, you're getting married, oh, this is the end of your independence, the end of your life, the end of your freedom and your fun or whatever. And instead of seeing like, this is helping you pursue virtue and becoming an even better version of yourself. Like the person that you've desired to become, you'll have to work on. It's not going to fix you, but that like, there's possibility for so much more growth and goodness in your life than before too. And that's a really good thing. And I think I don't know, we just seem to be quick to see the criticism, or jumping to like, well, marriage can't fix you, and just the negative mindset, staying small, don't go too big, stay comfortable, don't dream big with each other, think about like what you don't want instead of what you do want, because thinking about what you do want, I think, is a heck of a lot scarier and more intimidating than saying, well, this is what I don't want. Yeah, I know that leaves me room to play with it. It's like, sure, but what if you decide to lean into what you do want?
Yeah.
That's wild. That's like
Yeah.
a totally different mindset and frame of thinking altogether.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, it's just fascinating to like think of what the world could be like if more people lived in that goodness and lived in that truth of like, and it's not the like endless possibilities, everybody gets a trophy, you're good at everything, but like that, like your spouse like strips away things from you, like your selfishness and your pride, but also like highlights and brings out the best in you.
Mhm.
Like that's, so it's a painful process, but it's also a liberating process to like become more fully like who God created you to be, because and with your spouse. And again, like there's a balancing act of like, yeah, good, and to work towards the virtue and to work towards like what it, yeah, it's intimidating, it's scary. Like, what are the things that Monica's good at? Like, am I allowed to like think about those things and say those things? Like, but like you support me in that and you empower me in that. And that's the neat thing about having a spouse too, is you have that other cheerleader that's like, yeah, always gonna be there.
Yeah. And so like, and also with our kids, I think we've tried to instill that in them of being cheerleaders of each other. And they're very naturally cheerleaders of us. And I don't mean to say like that because we do great things all the time.
No.
But like they're very quick to point out like so for Mother's Day,
Oh, it's so cute.
the kids all half of them can't read, but they decided to just pick out whatever cards they wanted to give
I almost got a grandma one. It's fine.
Yes, it was terrible. She wasn't there. I was there by myself. It was terrible. But so they picked out a card and then Monica read it out loud, and our oldest just turned and he was like, that's exactly how I feel. That's exactly it. It was a very
So
like,
sweet.
and it was so sweet. And I was just like, those little wins like that make the difficulty of parenting worth it, of just like, okay, you get it. Like, this is what we're trying to build. It doesn't look perfect, but it's in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And that was just a really cool moment.
That's so awesome. As a side note, what's the age range for your kids?
So our oldest is 8. We have 8, 6, almost 5, 3, and 1.
Okay, that's awesome. We have 2 and an almost 1-year-old. So just hearing that, I'm like, oh man, we're gonna have those like moments of seeing just like, I mean, we see it now. We have glimmers, as like our oldest Lissy's like, her language and like understanding and connecting to things. And so it's just like, just to think that there's going to be even more of those possibilities is so amazing. And so
it's
rewarding.
Yeah, it's incredible to see like their personalities and their individualities start to emerge. And especially like the older they get, the more they like are not like what you expected them to be. But also like, wow, that's so neat that you came out that way and you're becoming this person.
So our 2 youngest are 1 and 3, and I'm happy with all the ages, but like I kind of miss 2, and like there's just like our youngest is 1 now, and he's starting to, hopefully he'll walk soon, but he's getting close to it. But just like he's so cool, and like him learning things for the first time and just seeing those things like spark, like part of me misses that too, because like things that they used to think are awesome, we're just like, yeah, dad, it's whatever. I'm just like, oh, okay, aren't I still cool?
No.
Okay. So like there's just so much greatness in like every stage. It's just all awesome. And all full of tantrums, like all the ages. Sorry. Balance. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's both and. It's like, this is great and also this is hard, and that's okay to make space for both, which I think is just so needed when it comes to family and parenthood and just marriage when you don't have kids yet, or you maybe never have kids. Like there's that both and, like, this is great and it's hard and it's fine to be in that space.
Yeah.
It ties in with just thinking about, how you guys have written and talked more about marriage, like using the language of being on the same team. We've started using that more and more, and that has really helped us reframe and remember, like, okay, we're not against each other. We're not trying to do something, like we're trying to work on the same thing. And we have to like remind each other of that constantly, especially when things have been hard. So I'd love to get into this a little bit more. Like, why is that language so important? And why do you guys tend to emphasize that? the way you do?
So admittedly, we both were big athletes when we were younger, and then coached high school sports up until a few through our blood. And it was a huge part of our dating and
Mhm.
engagement and newlywed life of like just going to each other's athletic events and cheering our brains out for
Yeah.
our teams and
So-
stuff.
So like, because Monica would coach volleyball in the fall, I would coach basketball in the winter, I'd coach basketball in the spring, Monica would coach softball in the summer. So like we would just go from season to season and just we would be somewhere and like that, and we bring
Yeah.
the kids, because we did until we had
until Thomas was born.
yeah till our fourth kid. So like we were
Yeah.
constantly, and that was just like our kids were just used to being, all right, we're gonna go to see mommy's game, we're gonna see daddy's game, and like that was
Yeah.
a big part of life. So that really seeped into how we parented too.
Yeah. And we just we so appreciated the like sports can be yucky right now. Like I'm no stranger. We experienced that firsthand. But there is so much like goodness in the root of athletics and the root of team sport, and like of virtue building and of selflessness and thinking of your teammates first and what do you need to do to be a good teammate. But like really the idea of being a team, of being unified, of being like we're going for the same goal, and each of us on a team has a different role to play. Like the way to be successful in athletics is not to have all point guards, right? Like it's not to have all quarterbacks. Whatever the sport is, like each has a unique role in like working towards that achievement. And I think that is one way that we've tried to articulate, like we're both going at this at different angles because we have these different skill sets, we have these different perspectives, but like as long as our end goal is the same, then we can work on strategy. But like really working on being a unified team has reminded us that in the times like when we're disagreeing and in conflict, like let's not make it bigger than it is, because like we can shame each other in those times. Like let's really just focus on like the approach versus the like intent.
Yeah, it's funny as you're saying that, like there's also, and I think this is from coaching, that there's times where when we've coached teams that sometimes like you just have to push through and like, all right, we're going to get through this, we're going to come out the other side. And there are other times where you have to take a step back and reassess, like, are we going about this the right way? Do we have to switch up our strategy?
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking like, yeah, there's been even like this past week of ways that we're not going to have the discussion right now. Let's just get through this. We need to get to the other side of this, and then we'll talk. And there's been other times where like we need to pause. This is not going well. And just being able to ebb and flow with each other, I think has come from the.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess like the team idea, we are not avid sports people. So when we heard team, we're like, wow, that's super awesome. We should try that. So it's helpful just to hear for you, like just in speaking so well to it, just like how to reframe and think about teamwork and just really making sure that, you're connected and you have this understanding of cheering each other on. And it's not always going to be perfect, but it's showing up for each other. It's like,
yes,
you're showing up, you're there. I mean, that was really cool just to hear how you guys are like at each other's games, you're bringing the kids with, and that's awesome. I mean, that's something that we talked about, like maybe we're not, doing softball teams and stuff like that, but we're like, the goodness that you said it's in athleticism, we've talked about, where we're like, there's something so good here. And really like where you do have to figure out, when do you have to push through? Okay, when is it time to tune in? And sometimes you kind of have to do both, and sometimes you have to pick one and you just have to move forward, and you have to move, like you have to do something. And I think like that's something that I think has been challenging sometimes for us, is like we can't just sit in this and keep talking and spiraling and distance. It's like, okay, maybe we need to take a pause, like maybe we need to like try something else, maybe we need to like see someone else and figure out if there's a different way to look at this or do this or strategize this.
Yeah. And also like reevaluating is not a sign of failure. Like that's one of the things that like I think was hard for us at the beginning, of like, oh, these things that we thought were going to work so well in marriage and in parenting and in anything in life. Like when going back to the athletic analogy, like every opponent is different. Everything you're going to face is coming from a different angle. It's coming from a different perspective. So like, yeah, as long as you're like rooted in like, again, what that end goal is, and like and that for us, like, that's our faith. Like, if we're going to be like rooted in virtue and in our faith, then like how we go about these different situations, it's okay that it's different from situation to situation, because willing to not be right, or be willing to mix it up a little bit. And I think sometimes we don't out of fear, sometimes we don't out of pride, sometimes like there's all these different reasons why we want to like stick to it. But I guess that's one of the things too, like don't, it's not a failure to change how you go about things.
Yeah. I'm thinking, sorry, as we're talking, because like or they were teens, now they're not.
Gosh, no.
When I
They're
coached
getting
them,
married this summer.
yeah, right, they're getting married this summer, and like one starts, what's it called with the Army? He's
gonna start basic
training.
Start
basic training in the Army. Like they're just they're grown up. And I was remembering one of the lessons I taught them, or I really tried to hammer in with them, was that it wasn't about like the outcome of the situation, but it's the journey that it's the journey you're taking. Like you're every time, like you're doing better than you did last time. Like so it's okay that you failed at this particular thing. It's about the journey. And just to think, I'm like, wow, the journey they're on, like, I hope that they take a little bit of that into whatever they do and with their families when they're older. But yeah, so like with everything we go through, as big of a deal as it is in the moment, just remembering like, okay, like we are growing, we are getting better, reflecting on like, all right, where were we the last however many years we were married. That's always been helpful too, to like kind of reflect on like, we've grown, so like let's keep growing, let's not get down on ourselves. I know this is hard right now.
In the spirit of teamwork, sometimes someone's got to run out and grab both the screaming children. So I'm going to let you guys go. It was one and then it became two. And so that's my
I'm impressed by that team sacrifice right there.
Gosh, you guys, this is so good. And all of a sudden we're like, what is that? Rage screaming. So I will carry out the interview as we continue on, but woo, here we go.
Awesome. This is real life.
This totally ties in with everything we're talking about. You're like, well, time to pivot. It's about the journey. Like, not I'm like, all right, not a perfect podcast. Not that I expected it to be, but definitely was expecting this outcome. But I think it's so true what you said, just we're so quick to, I think, want to speed through the journey. And I don't know if that's just like, millennials, Gen Z, what, is this just like culturally for everybody, regardless of, where you're falling on the spectrum and age, where it's just like, let's just burn through. Let's just get to the end result. Let's Amazon Prime it. Don't want to have to think about it. Don't want to have to put in the hard work because this is really uncomfortable. And it's just like, okay, well, but you miss out on all the good things that come from the journey and the learning, which you kind of have to do. You kind of have to fail. You're going to have to figure out, how do I pick myself back up? What does it look like to pick each other back up?
Yes.
Or I'm going to have to help you pick yourself up because this is a struggle, and that's okay. Like these things happen.
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
Something I also wanted to check in with you guys about and talk about this more, because I've seen a lot. I mean, just in all, whether it's Catholic, non-Catholic, around the shoulds of roles. I mean, Renzo, you talked about being a stay-at-home dad, and I was like, bold, because I love it. Because it's like you're leaning into what your family needed. It wasn't about like this idea of, well, this is how you need to be a man or how you need to be a woman. And I think we're just seeing so much in the challenges with the gender ideology as well, that this idea of like, putting on a skirt and lipstick doesn't make you a woman. That's not what makes you a woman. So what does it look like, I think, to be able to grapple with these ideas about gender roles, especially in the framework of family life, where there is room to create the family that you need to live out for your vocation, for society, to be saints. And also, like, yes, there's some guiding principles around like the feminine genius, the masculine genius, but how do we get confident playing in that space and being willing to say like, okay, God, like, show us what you need our family to live out? Because I think it's kind of like the cans and the can'ts again, what we were talking about. Like, it's a lot easier to say like, oh, well, what can't I do versus what can I do? Like, if you want to go do van life with your family and homeschool and travel the country, like some people are going to think you are crazy. But if that's what you're called to do, like, it's going to be great. It's going to work out. And like, you just can't really focus on the haters. Block out the
Yes.
haters. It's going to bring up
That's
that
it.
vine from
That's
like
it.
2011.
I love it. Let's do it. Yeah, share about your time at home. And
Well, so one thing I'd want to say though is if we hadn't switched roles, I don't know where we would be with our marriage.
Yeah.
Of like it's not like we reflect on our marriage and we're like, okay, well, let's switch roles now. But like the opportunity came, and just a lot of prayer and discernment, went into it. And I think that's the first
so it
part.
wasn't like, yeah, and it also wasn't on a financial need. Like
Right.
it wasn't like he lost his job and
Right.
like both of us apply and whoever
Mhm.
gets the first one goes and
Right,
does
right,
it.
right.
Like it was definitely a discernment, and it was a choice for you to leave and for me to accept a new
Yes.
position.
And there's a lot more besides just our relationship that went into it. I know that the job Monica got, she's very, very good at. She has her master's in educational leadership. So because going back to school and teaching was definitely what she was supposed to do during that time. And then I was given the opportunity to grow in a way that I didn't realize I had to grow. So again, I do think a lot of discernment went into it. And I think that's the hard part with most families, just being grounded in our relationship with God, our individual relationship with God, our joint relationship with God. Even if things aren't going well, and trusting that he's going to guide it in the right direction, that really helped. And I was embarrassed at the time to even say that I was stay-at-home dad, but I really leaned into it. And I was like, no, it's okay, because this is what our family needs right now. And at that time, like that was the first time I ever went to daily mass, was when I was a stay-at-home dad. And that's when I started reading JP2. I hadn't really read him before. And just learning all these things, and God really opened up a whole new world to me because, I was home. And it just would have been terrible if I had been like, no, I'm the man, I have to go to work, and not have let God work through what he was leading us to.
And I think like it opened your eyes to like really what the like elbow deep parenting looks like, and instead of like from a distance.
Yes.
And
oh yeah, no, being a stay-at-home parent is the most difficult thing there is. I can't, and I will argue with whomever wants to argue about that, and I will win the debate, because I've done both, and it was so much harder being home with the kids, and then because you get no breaks. And I know, and you've said that to me, but like I lived it. You get no breaks, and they are constantly asking for you. And it's funny because even their attitude towards me changed, and where like right now when I come home, they still ask Monica for everything. They'll still go mommy, even though like daddy's right here. But when I was a stay-at-home dad, like they would come to me for things and ask daddy, and it was just very different, and it was very draining. And I never appreciated how much Monica did as a stay-at-home parent before that. And that was something I wanted to get out there. Like I remember coming home when Monica, so before I became a stay-at-home dad, I remember coming home and not taking initiative to do the dishes, not taking initiative to help pick up around the house, not taking initiative to help her with the things that she'd been dealing with all day. And then when I was in it, and I was a stay-at-home dad, and Monica came home and she helped me with those things that I wasn't getting to throughout the day, I just saw how different and how much I was lacking. And not to say, it wasn't like a shameful thing, but I was like, wow, my wife does so much. And I just wasn't appreciative of it until before that.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of to your point of like the role is not what matters. Like if the church had specific things that she, in her endless infinite wisdom, required of men and women, she would say it, like in their duties. And because she's very articulate and clear with with us. And so I think that like our family benefited from us being willing to be like to step outside of like societal norm roles, or even like what a lot of people in the church would argue are traditional roles for men and women. how he was a stay-at-home parent is different than how I'm a stay-at-home parent because of his masculinity versus my femininity. And like that doesn't start or stop because of like the job description that we have.
Mhm.
It is because that is like who we are. That is how we are created to be. And that just like seeps out in how we speak to one another, how we treat one another, how we care for our children. That's not our duties. Like there's not a checklist of things that make you a man or a woman. It's who you are.
Right. Cause sorry. Right. Cause I was still dad when I was home. Like, it's not like jobs we have and the roles that we're playing outside the home. Like, we really want to make sure that our vocations are first. And
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's like regardless of male or female, like in a family, we're called to service to one another. And like Christ exemplified that in how he cared for his apostles, right? And he served them like, I don't know. I like back to coaching, like when we tried to use the example of Holy Thursday and Jesus washing the disciples' feet for our captains as like, this is what it means to be a captain, is to like serve, not like you lead through service. And like, that's our role as parents, is to like lead through service. And then our children are to serve one another, and we lead by example.
Well, like, and as a stay-at-home dad is where I first started learning about Saint Joseph. And that really I was lacking in service in the way that Saint Joseph would, or Saint Joseph, and the way that Saint Joseph exemplified his love for Mary and Jesus. I was not doing that for my children. There was very little action behind my faith and behind my words. And just realizing that a part of, even if you would call me, if you want to outwardly say, okay, Renzo's the head of the family, that means that I should be serving more than anybody else. And I was not doing that. So I had no business calling myself the head of anything. There's just so much that I was lacking. And my time in stay-at-home dad is what really reframed everything for me and how I saw just what it meant to be a man. And Saint really guided that.
And I feel like, sorry, go.
No, I was just going to say what's so powerful about this is that through your experience of being a stay-at-home dad and you guys, switching roles and really understanding and seeing the ways in which you were needing to serve, maybe those gaps in service were at, and what virtues were needed to be grown in. I mean, you now have this incredible ministry that's come through this opportunity to go to daily mass, to read St. John Paul the Great, for you to continue in your skills as a teacher, but then also, you said you have, the practical, the tactical, you're just like, you refined so much.
Yeah.
And now he's called you here. And that's wild to think about that. Like, here you are now, and the way in which God called you to that next season. I think it's so tempting to think that once you start in a role, that's it. That's for the rest of your, for your fertile years, or until you're 60 and retired, or until you're 80 and, whatever else it might be. And so I think it's super powerful that you guys were able to see that fruit just from your yes. Jumping back into a conversation around roles, here we are. And I think that's just it's just so powerful. I like what you said, that it's not really about the roles. And I'm going to jump into the story that we had probably our biggest argument around a sheet that we got at a marriage retreat weekend when we were engaged. And what it was trying to do was just see, like, what were the roles that you saw predominantly your mom did or your dad did, and just kind of like talk through it. But I didn't see it as much as that, as just like, I'm going to get stuck. I'm going to get stuck. I'm going to always end up doing these things, or always end up doing these things. And I really couldn't engage in a conversation because I was so nervous I was going to see some of the things that I remember seeing growing up, or that I didn't want, or that I was seeing talked about in some of these Catholic circles of, this is what a woman does. And she can't do this, or she's not as good of a Catholic if she's, not staying at home with her children or doing anything outside of her kids. And that, I think, really freaked me out more than anything. And so I think that idea that it doesn't need to be about that, as much as it can be a point of communication, it's not about getting stuck in your roles. Like, I love cleaning, you love cooking. And that is a great like way for us. Like at the end of the day, like you love to cook to de-stress.
Yep.
I don't. It's one more thing. Like it's not an enjoyment for me. And for us to be able to just like own it and not have a point of contention to say like, well, this is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And like, why waste the talent and why waste the skills too? Because like, what a beautiful way for somebody, like anybody, to serve their family than through like literally feeding them with the fruit of your work. And like, this is how I love you by preparing this, or this is how I love you by cleaning this and bringing, like allowing you to have a space that is like clean and tidy and comfortable to be in. Then you don't have to think about what should I do to help with that, or like just to like narrow down these like jobs strips away at like what actually is happening. Like what is the virtue, like what is deeper in here is it's my opportunity for me as a unique individual to gift to my family. Why are you smiling like that?
Because it's so fun. Like, I wish we had gotten that kind of thing, because I don't know what role you would not, because like you'd feel like you couldn't do, because you are like your grandma, like Oma.
So my grandparents, my grandma was 10 years older than my grandfather. And they were both like my grandfather was a Nazi soldier, and then they immigrated to America. So like talk about traditional, like this is what men and this is what women do. And like, and now I'm married to a Hispanic man. So that's just the irony.
We never met.
Anyway,
Grandma loved me though.
yes.
So I was her favorite.
Anyway, so I spent a lot of time with them. And then like, because my parents were divorced, when my dad had me for like those stretches during the summer for a week, he would be at work and I would spend time with my grandparents. Like that's where I went. And so my grandmother, 10 years senior to my grandfather, yard work, would push mow the front lawn because it was a really steep hill and she didn't want him to overexert himself and tip over. So she would do it. And then he had a ride-on lawnmower for the backyard and she would go ahead of it to pick up all the sticks in the way. And so like she was the bookkeeper, and she was just like in a skirt though. Like everything she did was in a skirt, mowing the front lawn at like a 45-degree, like in a skirt. So she just was like such a cool, like gender stereotype, but also like anti-gender stereotype, all wrapped into one sweet little lady.
Yeah.
And she wasn't this like feminist, hear me roar kind of like stick it to the man. Like she never spoke outwardly about it. She just did it. Like,
yeah.
She just...
No. And Monica's the same way. Like I mowed the lawn today, but I know that like she has like, it's not like well, that's my role. I'm the man, I mow the lawn or I take out the garbage. Like, no, Monica has no problem doing all of that. And sometimes she does. I'm like, okay, like if that's, like and it. She likes it. I hate it. But so like, no. And I love that idea of like, this is not just because you're the man and there's a man and a woman, like they have certain roles they have to do. Like it's what works within that family and within that spousal relationship. So that relationship could be the best it could be. And I just hearing them like, yeah, that's how you are. And I love it. I would never trade it.
That's so awesome. You know what it makes me think too, like just in saying this with the idea that I think sometimes hearing this, where I think it sounds very freeing. It's like, okay, I'm not going to be stuck into a box that I have to fit into, and my gifts aren't really here. They're actually over here. And maybe you have the gifts that would really be needed, like cooking, for example. Like I can cook, but you're a phenomenal cook. You're so much better at cooking. Like I'm better at detail cleaning and I thoroughly enjoy it. I find it like very fun. I don't know if anyone saw the memes during COVID where it's like one moment you're watching the squirrels outside, the next moment you're cleaning the baseboards with a Q-tip. I was like, yeah, totally. I would totally do that. And you're just like, gag me with that Q-tip. I would never do it. But like just in saying that though, I think there's a temptation to think that like there's a stripping away of like being a man or being a woman if you don't have these roles. But I think we're just pointing to like the depth in which like the roles don't make you a man or make you a woman. That's not what makes you who you are. But I think it gets a little fuzzy because I think we really like to have our boxes, and we like to say like, well, what makes you a man? Like having a beard and a cigar and mowing the lawn.
I can't grow facial hair.
It's because I think part of it is like we like to simplify things. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like the largeness of marriage is so terrifying. Like when you think about what it really is, and like how much it signifies our spiritual destination. That that's too much. Like tell me exactly what I've got to do.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why we, you see like the culture of like machismo, which is just like this ultimate distillation of manhood into like very specific, almost arbitrary things like facial hair. Like, let's just take facial hair for a second. Like, if you really think masculinity is something that can be honed and like, and lived, like what a more ridiculous thing. Now, for the record, I can't grow anything. So I would.
Jesus will be clean shaven when we get to heaven.
Of course he will, because he'll be well kept. Yeah. So like I would be bitter about that either way, but it's more like it's when we think of that, I love the way C.S. Lewis portrays marriage and portrays our spiritual destiny, and he's got this a really great imaginative mind, and when you think of just some of the ways he describes heaven and the ways that marriage reflects heaven, it's almost this it's this kind of terrifying largeness of spirit that we're honing, and that we feel we have to live into. There's a book as part of I just reread the series, so I'm kind of thinking about it, but Paralandra is the middle book in his space. Have you read it?
No, I have to.
It's so good.
Yes.
It's so good. It's about the fall, but happening on Venus. And in this case, the fall doesn't happen. And so he imagines what man and woman would be like in marriage without the fall. And it is pretty. I remember closing the book just going like, back to fallen world. Like it's huge. It's huge. Like man makes woman bigger and woman makes man bigger.
It's so hard because I wish, like, I don't even know if I can think of anything that specifically gives like this is what it means to be masculine in like a way that we could put it in a box. And at the same time, like I'm trying to portray to our sons, like this is what it means, like the push for them is how are you serving others with the gifts you have? And like that being the thing. So like our oldest Colby's 8, so like you're significantly stronger than your younger siblings. Like, are you using that strength to serve them, or are you using that to get what you want, and just trying to like slowly put those bits and pieces in, because we like I hope that's the right thing, because like that they can, but yeah, I hope that we're doing a good job with that with the boys, because like there's just so many different messages out there of what masculinity is, and femininity. Like I'm so happy the most recent book came out for Lisa Cotter, and that we've been able to kind of hopefully go through the Feminine Genius a little bit more, because even thinking about how we're expressing that to our youth group teens, like I don't feel like there's a definitive thing, and I just think it's really hard to come up with it for them, and so like they're very confused about it as well.
I think too, like you were saying, there's this intimidation, there's this hugeness to like the fact that like I was co-created by God, like as this unique individual, and to like think about, like to really pause and think about that as like, no, I'd kind of rather fit in a box, like you were saying, like tell me what I'm supposed to do, because otherwise the possibilities are so endless. But then at the same time, like as parents, you're like, no, I don't ever want you to fit into a box. Like you are so precious and perfect the way that you are, because you are different. And so like, I don't know, just try to imagine like what God is thinking of us when we're sitting here trying to like figure out what he wants us to look like. And he's like, no, just keep learning more about yourself, and like learning more about me so that you can learn more about yourself. Me being God. I'm not God, but that was him talking.
I really like that though, because I think that's true, that self-awareness and understanding ourselves, the way we think, or the ways in which we have these blocks around our relationship with God, relationship with others. The best thing that we can do is really understanding, who did God make me to be?
Yeah.
And then in relationship to my vocation and to my children, if you have kids, or your friends, your family, like, what does that look like to live that out? Because I think sometimes when we are thinking about the grandness and the largest, it's like, oh, I need to be, like a Catholic speaker, or I need to be an executive, or I need to have this really large role that's like based on the worldly standards, when it's like, it might be being the best husband and the best wife that you can be in your marriage. And like what G.K. Chesterton's quote, it's like, the most extraordinary thing is the ordinary love of a man and woman and their family. I think we forget that sometimes. I think in the hype of social media and influencing, it's like, oh, I'm supposed to be big and huge like a celebrity, when it's like, no, you are actually meant to just live out, maybe for some, but we're really meant to live out the calling that we exist in right now. And the power that is in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I loved about Saint Joseph, who will also be clean shaven in heaven. Just like how he was like, just the littleness of the way he lived out his sainthood. Didn't even have to say anything. Just husband, father, did it. That was it.
That's a wild concept. I'm saying wild a lot, but it just really is. It's just crazy to think that like these examples that we have of holiness and manhood and femininity, like they weren't these like abrasive, loud, or like small or apathetic. I mean, they really leaned into like, my relationship with God, who is God calling me to be, do the thing. And I think we can get so stuck in the discernment piece of just like, well, I don't know. It's like the Notebook, what do you want? What do you want? And it's like, it's just like, okay, I think sometimes we just have to move and realize like, we're not going to make the most perfect decisions, but this is where God's grace comes in. This is where he qualifies us and provides us the people we need, the tools that we need, the skills we need, the time we need to be able to do these things, and actually trusting him in his greatness. And realizing that like, he can do anything, and he can do anything with us if we allow him to.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've covered a lot here. There's more I want to do. I'm like, I think we need to have you guys for part 2, and maybe not screaming children, and we could have drinks involved.
That'd be awesome.
But I'd love
That'll be our screaming children next time.
Okay, there we go. Trade off. What would you say is one of the most important things that a couple can do to build a strong foundation for a holy marriage? I know there could be many, but what's that one that just pops into your head that you're like, I think this would be a game changer?
Oof. One thing. I
think
we'll have different one things.
Yeah,
you go
maybe,
first.
yeah.
I keep thinking.
You get 2. Technically, you get 2.
So like, I'm going to go like aside from the spiritual stuff here, and because I'm more the practical one, but like talk about everything, like leave nothing unsaid. Because so much misunderstanding comes in like not communicating about something. So like, be willing to be vulnerable, be willing to be wrong, be willing to be embarrassed, be willing to go there. Because like, as you keep practicing that, it doesn't become as embarrassing. It doesn't become and it becomes so fruitful to just like, maybe you don't start on the same page, but you at least know what page you each started from. Like, you can go from there. But if you assume things, if you leave things unsaid, then where do you go?
So it's funny because I'm trying to think of like what I wish I could say to myself when I was an engaged newlywed or dating. So for me, it would be that that good things are hard. And so like, that means like in the spiritual life, like there's so many days that I don't feel like praying. So many days I don't feel like getting up with the kids. There's so many days I don't feel like talking about everything and going through it. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't do them. Like, and that those good things are hard. And then just really leaning into that. That's advice I wish I had gotten, because I definitely expected life to get easy at some point, and that, oh, like this is just coming naturally now, and that there's not these hard conversations. But no, like just leaning into that and especially with prayer life, like leaning into building a daily prayer life is not easy, but necessary.
These are great. This was such a fun conversation to have with you guys. I love your points. They're like spot on. I was having a whole other section around like, let's talk about communication. So you covered that. And then I really like the consistency and realizing that it doesn't stop. We're always learning in our marriage, and that it doesn't just end at some point. You're like, well, nailed it. Got that. Check.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is continual preparation for heaven. Like this is the marriage prep. Damon Owens recently had said that. And I was like, oh my gosh, like marriage is actually the marriage prep for the eternal marriage.
Yeah.
I was like, this is so true. And it just shifts a little bit in your way of thinking that you're like, yeah, I have to, like, if I'm not learning, if I'm not growing, if I'm not uncomfortable, I'm probably dead. Like this is so important that we have to do this with each other and showing up for each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Yeah. And sometimes hard isn't like tears, crying hard. It could just be like, I just don't really want to do it. But yeah, the apathy. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Thanks for navigating.
Thanks for having us.
Tears and crying here in this episode too with our kids, not us.
It was me. I got so emotional. Leave the room. I'm okay now.
We'll be sure to link to all of your website, podcasts, resources here, and some of the blog posts I mentioned as well in the show notes. So thank you so much. Thank you for all that you're doing for marriages. This is such a gift, and it's been a joy to be able to chat with you guys tonight. Thank you.
You're great. Awesome. Thank you. It's nice to meet you guys.
Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, and help expand the conversation around women's health. If you'd like to learn more about fertility awareness, visit www.managingyourfertility.com for more information, resources, guides, and so much more.